Dogs bark and run and do this. And all of that can sometimes be out of hand. So that's why they make these, a huge array of electronic dog collars that use different stimuli to modify your dog's behavior. Let's see how they do it and if it's a good idea. Now, these are often called bark collars or shock collars based on their most common technology. However, they span a wide array of behaviors they target and stimuli they use to modify those. Let's start with the first one that's best known. Electric shock, or as it's known today in more market-friendly verbiage, static. Lots of volts, but minuscule amps. That's why these things don't kill or injure your dog. Now, the electrical shock or static collar uses a couple of electric probes here, like you see there. They're metal, they make contact with the dog's skin. They have to get through fur to do that. In fact, the manuals for these go to some great length to show you how to get these in there to make contact with skin. Then they pass electrical current, AC by the way, between the two through conductive skin tissue. That's the mechanism of it. Now, on many of these, the level of electricity that is passed between these two electrodes can be varied. The problem is, you can't ask your dog, what does that feel like? So you're doing kind of a random adjustment. It can either be done in the collar or sometimes on a remote like this, which brings us to how these are activated. Some of these are activated by barking, the sound and vibration of it. Others also let you do a manual trigger here with that big old orange button that says, "Zap my dog now." And many of them will operate in both modes. Now, whatever kind of static or shock collar you get, as far as I can tell, there are no regulations about what they put out. This is a bit of a Wild West. I've got an ability to set the power on this one. I'm going to start here down at 5. That's on a scale of 0 to 99. Put my fingers across the electrodes, and let's see what happens. I don't feel a thing. Let's kick it up to 15. Again, it's on a scale of 99 at the top end. Okay, got that. Uncomfortable. Let's try 35. Is this my last YouTube video? Ah, damn it, no. Not fun. I won't go beyond that, to be honest. Call me a wimp, but that's very uncomfortable. 99 seems egregious. But this is what these will do in terms of feel. Everyone's going to feel it differently, not to mention every animal. So let's get some science behind this. If I put our standard voltage tester here that you might use around the house across this, it's picking it up there at 35 on the range. But that doesn't quantify it either. So what I'm going to do is hook this thing up to a multimeter. We've got our fluke meter here. I've got it set to AC voltage. We just take and put our probes across the terminals here on the dog collar. All right, now again, I'm set to 35 right now, and let's put this into recording mode so we see our peak. Reset that, cleared, and here we go. What did we get? If I metered this right, the collar's delivering about 90 volts when set to 35. That's considered high voltage, though clearly the amps are low. Interestingly, even if I rack it up to 99, I was still getting about 90 volts, at least on this product. Another collar, operated by an app, topped out at 45 volts at its highest setting. And another one, triggered by a proximity transmitter you place in your home, only delivered about 20 volts in our testing. The vibrating collars use a vibration motor similar to the one that makes your phone buzz, so we all know what that's like. Then there are spray or scent collars, typically using citronella, although sometimes just water. Now this one's a real crowd pleaser. It does a lot of things, including tone, vibration, but also if you push this button right here, watch what happens. It sprays a scent. There's a little tiny citronella cartridge in there. I hate citronella. And since this collar be mounted about like so, below the dog's throat and aiming forward, that cloud of citronella goes right forward and right back into their face and in their nose. And that all sounds like kind of a quaint, nice way to modify a dog's behavior. But remember, to them, that's probably like a wall of stink. Because according to Florida state researchers anyway, dogs have between 10,000 and 100,000 times the scent acuity that we have. So take that smell of citronella and really multiply it. This is why dogs are able to sniff out cancer with high accuracy, while our dumb noses miss garlic half the time. Sound training collars emit a beep or a tone that is also in the human hearing range, or sometimes ultrasonic sounds that we can't hear. Now, as you may have noticed, a lot of these collars do multiple stimuli: sound and scent and vibration and shock. So you don't need to stack them up even if you're going to use this technology. One collar may do it all. These, along with a whole renaissance in pet tracking technology, have definitely brought us to what has to be the golden era of wearable pet tech. But is it a good idea? For that, I went to Marin Humane, just north of San Francisco. I've volunteered here and know they have a renowned behavior and training department headed by Dawn Covell.
Come on, guys.
Come on. Let's go for
guys.
the promenade. The simple and the stupid question here from someone like me is, why do dogs bark?
Well, dogs bark because they're trying to tell you something. They're either excited, they're happy, they're sad, they're lonely. So they're trying to communicate. First of all, you want to figure out, why is my dog barking, right? It could be lack of mental stimulation, lack of physical stimulation. And your dog might be lonely. Social isolation is a huge problem for dogs. Your dog might be concerned. Maybe you've left your dog out in the backyard all by himself and he's like, whoa, this is a lot of stuff to deal with. So, there's a lot of reasons for dogs to bark, and it's important for you to understand why they're barking before you just try and suppress the behavior.
Now, when you take one of these devices and use it on your dog, we have no way of knowing what it feels like for them.
Right. I mean, we can certainly put it on ourselves and shock
Yeah.
ourselves and say, wow, that's unpleasant. But you really don't know what it feels like to a dog because they're built differently.
And even these ones that use scent, which
Right.
I guess were considered a less harsh alternative to the shock collars, or what they call now static collars.
Right.
We don't really know how a dog senses citronella.
Right. A dog's olfactory system is so much more sophisticated than ours. It could possibly be more punitive than a static or shock collar. As you say, we just don't really know.
When you use one of these
Yes.
to get an animal to stop doing something, what's the downside of that? If it works, it looks like it works to a lot of people.
Right. Well, what we really want to do when we're trying to fix a behavior is we say, what is the behavior that we don't like? And then what we try and do is replace it with an alternative behavior that we do like. So instead of going straight to punishment, we want to look at the underlying cause of the behavior and see if we can train a different behavior that would eliminate the other behavior. So for instance, jumping up. You have a dog, I don't like my dog jumping up. Instead of punishing the jumping up, you say, well, what would be okay instead? And a really nice alternative is teaching your dog to sit when they greet people as opposed to jumping up. So then you don't even have to go to punishment, when punishment can degrade your relationship with your dog. It can make your dog afraid of you as opposed to wanting to do the things that you want them to do.
So let's say you've got barking. What do you do to divert that, I guess,
Right.
in that scenario? We talked about jumping up, but
Sure.
barking is the one that everyone
Sure.
they lose their patience really fast.
Well, the first step is to get a little bit of a history about what's going on with the dog. When does it happen? How does it happen? What does it look like when it happens? What triggers it? And then we see if we can sort of break that down. If this triggers your dog's barking, let's see if we can get rid of the trigger, for instance. Or if your dog
That's
is...
different than hitting it with one of these stimuli to
Right.
just cut it off.
Right, right.
We can use these manually when you're present, but then there are times when you set these things on automatic and you go away.
Right.
Do you have concerns about these automatic modes that are triggered by behavior, by barking?
Right. The problem is the dog is wearing these when you're not home, so you really don't know what's happening. For some of the bark collars, if you have a multi-dog household, the bark of a different dog can trigger the shock for the dog that you want to try and suppress the barking. And that's really unfair to the dog, because you really need to pair the negative stimulus with the behavior that's happening. So if they're getting shocked for behavior that they're not even doing, well, that can make a dog crazy. I'm curious about products, so I try and test them out to see if they, are something that we want to recommend to our clients. So I did test out the citronella bark collar on a Malinois I had who was kind of a sport barker, meaning he would go outside, he'd look around, he'd just start doing some random barking. Now, why was he doing the barking? I call it sport barking, but I had eliminated, mental stimulation, lack of mental stimulation, lack of physical stimulation, all of those things. So, from my point of view, he really didn't have any reason to bark.
Just barking for fun.
Let's call it that. So I tried the citronella collar, and after a couple barks and a couple of sessions, he's like, "Oh, I can't bark." So it did suppress the barking. But what I noticed is that it started him spinning. It created an OCD behavior of him just going outside and thinking about barking and instead spinning. And that was really disturbing. It was more disturbing than I even thought it would be. So of course I discontinued that experiment.
Yeah, interesting. So sometimes when you use something like this, a negative stimulus, you're kind of squeezing the balloon one place and it's bubbling up somewhere else perhaps.
Right, you're suppressing behavior as opposed to addressing the cause of the behavior.
Bottom line is, before you try to stop a behavior with your pet by pushing a button on an app or on some kind of remote control, you got to dig into why it's happening. These are complex creatures. They have reasons for what they do. You got to understand that first. The collar comes later, if at all.
Loop, loop, tunnel.